Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. Lots of interesting things unfolding this morning. So you guys will not believe this, but the Biden campaign is so terrified of protesters, they may be moving the DNC remote.
It's going to be good.
Incredible. We'll bring you that. Hillary Clinton also making some incredible and contempt-filled comments. Break that down for you. Trump doing a pretty wild rally in New Jersey, making some very interesting comments there. So I'll give you the latest with regards to him. He's also got a big legal week coming up. Michael Cohen testifying, all sorts of stuff unfolding there. We've got some new data that for the first time in history, billionaires are paying less in taxes for an effective tax rate than regular working class Americans, which is utterly disgusting. So we'll show you the numbers behind that and what it means for society. We also have a lot of developments with regard to Israel in particular. Egypt is now joining that International Court of Justice genocide case alongside South Africa against Israel. That is an extraordinary move, incredibly consequential. We'll break that down for you. We also have some interesting doings from Secretary of State Tony Blinken. They issued a report from the State Department saying, they're probably committing some more crimes, but we're just going to pretend it's not happening and continue shipping weapons. So give you all of the details there and his comments on the Sunday talk shows, which were also quite noteworthy.
Yes, that's right. Before we get to that, though, we teased a major announcement, and you guys all thought it was just counterpoints. But there's actually another major announcement that is coming later on this week.
Possibly it's actually even more major.
Possibly
and
even more major.
Counterpoints Fridays was a big idea.
Many
big
people
deal.
are saying, you know, not only you thought 5 days a week was big. Well, we'll just wait to hear what we have to say. It's actually coming on the heels of our 3-year anniversary. So all of our premium subscribers will be the ones to both reap the rewards of this major announcement and be the very first ones to actually find out about it. So if you want to be one of those people, breakingpoints.com, you can stay tuned. And I think people are really going to enjoy it. So there's a lot of work behind the scenes that the team and are going to be doing over the next several days. So we really appreciate you at a time like this. And we thank you very much. Sign up if you can.
Yep.
All right, let's start with the DNC. As Krystal said, this is arguably one of the most important stories, and yet is not getting the attention that it deserves. The DNC is considering moving their convention, quote, semi-online as a result of the protests that have broken out across college campuses and out of President Biden's own fear, as we've seen, where he screens religiously all of the people who are entering into his events. His campaign staff are blacklisting folks who are known protesters and others. They're terrified at this point of their own delegates, especially considering how many the uncommitted vote was able to garner. Let's go and put this up there on the screen. It says the DNC is preparing for the worst in Chicago, quote, without the help of the city's mayor. As Democrats plan their convention, they will have to address the elephant in the room, how to mitigate the threat of disruptions and work with a rookie mayor who unabashedly sympathizes with the protesters. But the one that really caught my eye here, Krystal, was about the moving of the events to a semi-online. One of the reasons, apparently, is that they have a lot of practice from the 2020 DNC convention during COVID, during a pandemic in which everybody was not allowed to attend. And so they think this would be an elegant solution. I mean, really what they're trying to work around is anything that would happen that would be much alike 1968. One of the big differences between 1968 at that time was that Mayor Daley of Chicago was very anti-Vietnam War protesters. Actually, his police officers, which, you know, were involved in quite a bit of the violence, and they want to avoid that at absolutely all costs, try and create any reminiscent, you know, pictures or any of that that's been coming out of that. But I mean, it's major just because, you know, just this morning, and we'll talk a lot about it tomorrow, new major New York Times Siena poll out for President Biden, which just shows a total rip apart amongst the Democratic coalition. So before we get to any of the polling or any of that, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the solution here isn't to hide from your own voters, which is what they've been doing, not just with regard to this, but we've covered how Joe Biden really can't even visit college campuses. He's supposed to give the commencement address at Morehouse, historically Black university. And there's a lot of fear there about, oh my God, what if there's a protest? God forbid. The last time he spoke on a college campus, it was actually here in Northern Virginia at George Mason University, was interrupted 10 times. So they know that as long as their policy doesn't change, there is going to be continued upset, continued disruptions. And frankly, they're terrified of being able to handle that. You know, the political dynamics are such that you have, as Saagar alluded to, you've got a new mayor in Chicago, Brandon Johnson, who comes from an activist background. He was actually like a labor leader, and he has expressed sympathy with the protesters and expressed that he wants to avoid having this sort of like authoritarian police state crackdown that we've seen in all kinds of other college campuses across the country. As the governor, you have J.B. Pritzker, who is sort of more aligned with Biden and the pro-authoritarian crackdown crowd. But Pritzker has said, you know, if you're wondering if they would call in the National Guard or whatever, he said he would not go over the head of Brandon Johnson, the mayor of Chicago. Apparently, there's some icy tension between the two of them. So that's the landscape. So I guess they're, you know, trying to cut their losses and embrace the hybrid work model, work from home
that's right.
model. And, you know, it's part and parcel with the direction of Biden's campaign in general, where the interviews are few and far between. They're completely controlled. They're with absolutely friendly interviewers so that you're not going to be caught off guard. Everything is super controlled. Number one, because they know the climate amongst what should be their base of voters, young people in particular, but also African Americans, also, you know, Arab Americans,
yes.
Muslim Americans. There's a huge swath of the Democratic base that does not agree. In fact, a majority of the Democratic base, whether they are participating in protests or not, does not agree with Biden's position on Israel. This is the area where he has the lowest approval ratings, whether you're talking about Democrats, independents, or Republicans. So he knows he's got a big problem there. And rather than actually changing course and trying to deal with that problem, they just want to control everything and hide. So, you know, I can't say that it's a stupid idea. It's probably better for them to strategically, since they're not going to change course, to try to control everything to this degree and make sure that nothing unexpected breaks through. And I think it's also a testament to the savviness of these protesters who, even though the Biden campaign has gone to great lengths, even to the extent of like basically racially profiling to try to keep any potential protesters out of their events, they've been very savvy and very clever in how they've been able to disrupt and confront a lot of these politicians. So just a wild state of affairs, and shows you how, frankly, poorly and how hamstrung this campaign is, both by an aged president and by their terror of their own voters.
Yes, that's right. Let's actually get to some of that. CNN's Harry Enton, who is one of the good ones over there, used to work over at 538. He always does a fantastic job of breaking some of this down. He's highlighting some of the coalitional splits here. Let's take a listen.
Let's look at the choice for president in 2024 among Biden's 2020 voters, all right? Because I think this sort of illustrates sort of how Biden's getting pushed a little bit. So if you like Biden on the Israel-Gaza war, look at that. He's getting 87% of the vote. RFK Jr. is getting 8%. Donald Trump way down here at 4%. But if you dislike Biden, if you disapprove of the job he's doing on the Israel-Gaza war, look at this. He's getting just 50% of that vote. My goodness gracious. These are people who voted for him last time. RFK Jr. is getting 20%. This is just a 30-point margin compared to a 79-point margin among those who approve of Biden on the Israel-Gaza war. This is a huge dividing line within the Democratic Party, and that's something, of course, we're seeing right now between the progressive wing and those more centrist or mainstream Democrats. Do you believe that America's support for Israel is too much? The clear majority, 60% of those folks who are currently not voting for Biden, but did last time around, say that America's support for Israel is too much.
So there you go. It's very clear. The other thing is that they're calling out the big guns for fundraising because they don't have, Krystal, as you said, the organic, like activist donor base that the Bernie Sanders campaign, or even honestly the Trump campaign, has had at certain points. We haven't seen it yet materialize, but I would not sleep on it. So they are now calling in the big guns. Let's put this up there on the screen. Hollywood and Obama. Biden is tapping Obama, George Clooney, Julia Roberts, and the Clintons for, quote, mega fundraisers. He's done 2 trips now that are planned to Silicon Valley. Remember that New York City spectacle where they had $26 million that they raised in a single night? He's expected to hold a fundraiser with Hillary and with Bill Clinton on the East Coast in this summer. It will raise similar amounts. The Ocean's 11 crew set to tap millions and millions of dollars in Hollywood. So they are tapping every big dollar donor, basically, that they can get their hands on. From what I understand, Silicon Valley's Vinod Khosla Krystal, which is a major venture capital firm. Him and his wife just hosted a major fundraiser in Palo Alto. Biden is heading back to Palo Alto. So all of the titans of, traditional Democratic industry are pulling out the guns to give him as much cash as possible.
Yeah, so the fundraising landscape is as such. Biden has thus far been able to significantly outrace Trump. Trump also has a problem because a lot of his money's going to his legal bills from his campaigns and affiliated super PACs, so that's an issue for him as well. The grassroots fundraising thing, Biden has never had a grassroots fundraising base. I mean, that's just never been a thing that has been there for him. And so this is nothing new. But the apathy among the typical sort of grassroots donor base, this is a Democratic Party and Republican phenomenon across the board. In fact, I think it may have hit Republicans a bit harder because Trump has so aggressively hit their grassroots low-dollar fundraising base so much that every other candidate is basically screwed. But there's also just a fatigue. If you guys ever get, all these emails, I don't know how they have my freaking number, but I get texts all the freaking time from these people. And I tell them to stop, but I still am on some list somewhere where I'm getting a million of these freaking things. I'm sure many of you are like that, or their emails or whatever. And so, when you get your 35th email from Nancy Pelosi saying, like, we have to donate $20 to stop fascism or whatever, at some point, it starts to have a little less impact. So the grassroots fundraising era, I don't know if it's permanently on decline. I don't know if it's just the nature of these candidates, the nature of these moments, but that's actually a problem for both political parties. The expectation is that this fundraising quarter, Trump is going to, for the first time, start to eat into the Biden advantage. So that's why they're trying to pull out all the big guns with George Clooney, Julia Roberts, whoever. I just wanted to underscore the polling there that Harry Enton was breaking down, because I think it's really important, because we've talked about this before. Like, is the upset over Biden's Israel policy, which, clearly the Democratic base in particular very upset with Biden's Israel policy, is that going to be a problem for him electorally? And I think these numbers make it very clear that yes, it is. Even if it's even if it's a minority of his base that are leaving him over Israel. And I think these numbers underscore that that is one of the primary reasons that people have fallen out of his coalition. Even if it's a relatively small number, he won by a very narrow margin across a handful of swing states. So when you have, those who are dissatisfied with the Biden-Israel policy, which is a large group within the Democratic base, and 50% of them are saying, I'm not with Biden anymore. That's a big, big deal. And, some people might try to argue like, oh, it's maybe some of them think he's not supportive enough of Israel, since that's the new talking point on the right, which I think is completely absurd. But anyway, that is the talking point that's out there. But then when you dig into those numbers, you see, no, by a 2-to-1 margin, they're saying he is going along with far too much with regard to Israel. He's doing far too much for Israel. So I don't think there's any doubt that this is a major electoral problem for him. There's clear evidence that these protesters are getting to them. They are absolutely terrified. I think that that is a feather in the cap, frankly, of the protest movement, that this campaign is having to shift. And I think the Biden moves, as we discussed before, at least signaling that maybe potentially if there's a quote unquote major invasion of Rafah, which we'll talk about more in the Israel bloc, then they may withhold some weapons, the pausing of at least one weapon shipment. I also think that that is in part a testament to the protest movement and the pressure that they have successfully put on this campaign and this administration.
It's interesting too, because actually Matt Stoller flagged, let's put this up there on the screen, definitely aligns, I think, with my ideology. It says, Americans overwhelmingly think that the U.S. is spending too much in military and financial aid to Israel. The, quote, stop sending my money on Israel argument is far stronger than, quote, a free Palestine argument. This is about a question that's been tracking now for several months, record high right now to this answer. Thinking about U.S. military and financial aid to Israel following the attack by Hamas, do you think that the United States is spending? And the answers are too much, about the right amount, not enough, and don't know enough to say. Interesting here that, even back in November of 2023, it was at 43%. It actually dropped in the interim. Now it's at a full-on 47. So not only plurality, we're getting near majority status. That's including a lot of people who are saying don't know enough to say. I would also add that secondary to Matt is that the Ukraine question is actually now a clear majority. We're now at 53% of people who say that we are sending too much. So it is very clear, I think, that the argument about foreign aid and specifically slavish devotion, just to any foreign state is very repellent to the American character. I was actually just walking my dog on Sunday and I saw one of those trucks with the screens that you can rent all around. And instead of, there was no like Gaza, baby, nothing. It was just like, Israel is a rich country. Why are we sending our money to them? And I was like, hey, that's pretty effective right there. Now, I don't think it'll have any effect on my boomer neighbors, but all it takes is one or two people to see something like this is a country with universal health care. This is a country with GDP, like a very high GDP per capita. They're richer than Canada, just so people know. They make $55,000 a year per capita. I mean, this is a very, very wealthy nation state. They have got plenty of trade. Like I said, if you ever visit Israel, they'll shove it in your face. High-tech startup nation, all this other stuff. It's like, fine, okay, you guys can pay for your own stuff.
Yeah.
That is very, very, it hits hard, I think, to a lot of Americans.
You could walk into almost any room in this country outside of a few elite enclaves and say, listen, why are we shipping all of this money abroad for these other countries' wars? Don't we have problems here at home? And everyone will nod their head. I mean, this is an incredibly populist position. And, not only do you have almost a majority and very clear plurality saying we're doing too much here with regard to Israel, the number that says we're doing too little, which is the position of like 95% of these representatives here in Washington, is 11%. 11%. That's how popular that position. I mean, you are hard pressed to find, honestly, that type of majority, overwhelming opposition to anything when you only have 11% who are like, yes, we need to ship more money, aid, weapons, et cetera. And yet, I mean, you saw the way they moved heaven and earth to make sure they did give that more money that 90% of the country is like, we don't want you to do. So extraordinary disconnect between the elite political class, the elite media class, and the vast majority of Americans, I don't care if they're Democrat, Republican, Independent, et cetera, on how they feel about funding these foreign wars. You put up the numbers before. Israel, as you said, is a wealthy nation. They've got universal health care. We don't. They have a much more robust social safety net and welfare program than we do. Bibi's out there lately saying, hey, we'll stand alone if we need to. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I say take them up on it.
Go ahead.
I say let's do it. Meanwhile, I've got a $10,000 deductible. Let's go and put this up there on the screen. We've had a walkout over at Duke University. Here you can see there were, I think it was about 100 protesters or so out of several thousand that walked out, disrupting Jerry Seinfeld's First of all, who would book Jerry for a commencement address? Am I just a chauvinist or something? I mean, I'm sorry. Unless it's the only entertainer I would like to hear from, Conan O'Brien. He did a great one several years ago to Harvard, and I actually recommend people go watch that on YouTube. Otherwise, I want to hear from somebody who's genuinely accomplished, but I guess that's just me. So anyway, the highlight of it is the DNC is in shambles. The Biden coalition is completely being split. They are panicking. They have money problems, so much so that they're having to tap full-on Hollywood. That's all they can rely on to try and drag them across. And foreign aid remains very unpopular because it is very clear that our politicians have dual loyalty. With that, I think let's get to Hillary.
The last thing on this, Fred Gutenberg and other people were like, see, they're walking out on him just because he's Jewish. It's like, give me a freaking break. This man has been aggressive. His wife helped fund the UCLA counter-protesters that went in and bashed people's head. He went and did some Fantasyland IDF tour in Israel. He's been aggressively pro-Israel. It has nothing to do with his religion and everything to do with his ideology. So just had to put that out there. But yeah, the reason to show you those protests, there were additional protests at a number of commencement ceremonies across the country. This is the type of thing that the Democrats are apparently so terrified of. God forbid you have some protesters, some chants, some walkouts, some disruptions, whatever. They're so terrified they have to move the entire DNC online, which pisses me off on a personal level because we're right now trying to plan what we're going to do.
Yeah, right.
And now it's like, well, is this even going to
Yeah.
be worth it? Are there even going to be things happening anyway? That's more of a personal
We'll
problem.
be there anyways. All right. Yeah. I hope they don't
Be
screw
there
it
to
up
see
for
what
us.
happens.
But yeah, I mean, look, I feel like it's not going to stop protesters from coming anyway. It's going to be online.
Yeah,
It's
true.
still going to be in the damn building. So regardless, we will be there, folks. At what is it called? The United Center?
Oh, I
think
have
that's
no
it.
idea.
All right. Well, I'll be there.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.